Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first discussion of The Thousandfold Thought, which is the third book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker. We're going to be reading this book roughly at the same pace as we did the previous two in the series. We're going to be reading 100 pages each week, and how many ever chapters brings us to 100 pages each week. Today, we're going to be discussing chapters 1 through 4, and next week, when we meet again, we'll be talking chapters 5 through 9. If you'd like to read along with us, discuss these books either here on the discussion group or on the forum, consider checking out the PageChewing forum. With me, I have the usual wonderful people we get to discuss this with. Steve, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Sure, I'm Steve, and this is my second time reading The Thousandfold Thought, and I'm happy to be here.
Mike?
Yes, my name is Mike, and really excited to continue with the series. A first time reader, and after a short hiatus, I was thinking, I could just read through the whole thing, but I'm glad to be talking with all of you because there's probably a lot of things that I misunderstood.
And I am Carl, also a first-time reader, and happy to be here.
Nice. Yep, I'm Varsha, also a first-time reader, and happy to be here. That almost rhymes. We should make a poem out of it. This, So what did everyone think? I felt we took a 2-week break from the previous discussion, like from the end of the last book, The Warrior Prophet. So it felt nice to take that break and then come back, looking forward to the book.
See, for me, I was getting withdrawals. I was like, I was getting like breaking out in hives, like getting feverish. It was really rough. I like needed to talk about it and like keep reading, but it was worth the wait.
Nice. Yeah. I'm glad that we picked up where we left off, and we started with all the usual characters that I've sort of grown attached is a strange word to use based on how I feel about them just this moment, but yeah, I I'm glad we picked up with familiar characters.
Well, why don't you start us off? Because before we jumped on, you were telling us about how your opinions changed from where we were at the end of The Warrior Prophet.
Yeah. So at the end of The Warrior Prophet, I was nearly furious at Agamian for how he thought about Esmeralda. Like I understood that he had his heart broken and everything, but what was surfacing at as a result of said broken heart were thoughts that he had entertained about Esmenet all along. She's just a whore, and this is all she wants. When in fact, like that's all he wanted. But I feel like she handled him extremely callously, without any concern for his feelings. I mean, maybe she was protecting herself. We kind of get the impression that she's worried that she'll fall back into his arms, and so she doesn't want to do that. But she was not at all gentle with him in letting him down. Not the first time, which I get, because she was worried for Kellis. He was hanging from a tree and she needed to get him right. But now that everything is fine, she's busy enjoying her newfound power and has no concern for poor Akamian. So yeah, I have sort of flipped on that. I expect I'll flip again when something else happens, but because I'm still not appreciating Agamian's inward thoughts about how she's just a whore and whatnot. But the man's heartbroken, and a few months ago, he was apparently your entire life, and like you can just turn around from that, and like that's fine too, but you're not being gentle with him at all.
I do think she like you said, that she is conflicted still. That I feel she has a moment where she like sees him and wants kind of to jump into his arms and reunite with him in a more romantic way, but he obviously things have changed too. And I feel you. She's definitely being callous in a sense, and I think it absolutely is a way to kind of protect herself, because she is afraid of jumping back to the way things were, and she can't because she's now married without being married to Kellis, and the leader, seemingly kind of the female face of this new cult, this new sect of the Enrithi movement. I certainly don't like where she's at, I mean,
Yeah.
for a number of reasons, not least because of her relationship with Kellis. And I mean, like we've said, how callous she seems to be in this position of power, that it definitely seems to have enabled some of her. I mean, she hasn't been like truly atrocious, compared to like basically all the men she's surrounded with.
Yeah.
But it's still not great, certainly, for her and for Akamian either.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's some really interesting exploration there in how it seems to me, at least this is what I read into it, how easily she fell into this role of power where she's like, yeah, kill him, yeah, get rid of him, I don't want to see him again, and so on and so forth. Like, just going from this place where she was extremely oppressed and such a victim of society, she seems to lack a great deal of empathy or compassion. Like, she does it without second thoughts, the difficult decision she takes. And yeah, she has some contemplation about how easily that does come, but she's not shying away from it, she's not refusing it. She's like, yeah, it's almost like she thinks she deserves it because she's been treated so poorly. And yes, she deserves nice things in life, but maybe no one should get to exercise power in this way. It yeah, I'm basically agreeing with you, Carl, that I don't know if this is what you meant, but this is one of the reasons why I do not like her position right now either.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Just to interject here, I think in the first chapter, I felt a little bit hopeful that there's still maybe some future for Esmenet and Akamian, because it seems, I think even Kellis says that she still loves him. I don't think he's kind of doesn't seem to mind sharing people, as we've noticed in the previous books. So I don't know. I feel like book 3 we might see a turn of events here, with maybe, because he's clearly still, even though he has this, he's definitely been scorned, but he still obviously is in love with her. So we'll see how that, and I think he was really excited to learn that he was going to be close to her. Although I think he's torn, because that has its own issues or challenges. But I think I remembered in chapter 1, he sees that kind of as an opportunity to kind of get her back, or if I remember correctly. But I don't know if you had the same kind of take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, that's what you're talking about is the same thing I was sort of alluding to earlier, where like she clearly is showing affection for him still, and desire, and we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I'm honestly not really sure. I don't know if it would be good for them or not. Like I don't know. They have a lot of journeying to do internally and externally, and I think it's very interesting where Akamian is at this point in the story. I confess, I think his storyline, his personal kind of storyline right now, is the thing that's the most interesting to me, at least in this first section, just because he's like balancing this immense weight of, knowing that he's helping this man who he views as the Messiah. I mean, he's being like, the Gandalf, like wise wizard figure, right? But in this like really strange, subversive way, where the hero is actually a manipulative sociopath. He doesn't know that, but he is. And the way he views it, he was cuckolded by this man, even though I don't know that that's necessarily an apt phrase for it, just because everyone thought he was dead. And yeah, I mean, it's just, he's working with the chosen one, but the chosen one sucks. And the chosen one, he has so many reasons to just like hate him, and he kind of does, but he also feels like he has to do everything he can to support him. Otherwise, the orcs are going to run over everything. So it's a tough position to be in, and I definitely find myself feeling for him a lot, even though at the same time I'm like, dude, Kellis, he's not what you think he is. I mean, maybe he is. That's the thing too, is like maybe he is this messianic figure, but he's also terrible.
I mean, Kellis is really leaning into the whole "I am your prophet" manipulation that he's doing of the people. Like, there's no way he's actually a prophet, right? He is just manipulating this crowd into thinking that he is their prophet. He's saying, "Oh, this is what my brother did. I'm coming, father," and like basically, apparently, Indri, Sageness, and God are his family.
Well, how do we define prophet, right? Because he can basically predict the future, whether or not he has magical powers, right? And that's one of the defining features, I feel like. And he does deal out wisdom, I would say. Like, in my mind, whether or not he's magical, whether or not he has a connection to any sort of higher power, although I guess that's probably one of the defining features of a prophet, right? So,
Yeah, that's the one I'm objecting to. Everything else is fair. Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair. But I do think he's very much acting in the role of prophet, and in some sense he is facing off against this diabolical, demonic threat from outer space. So I mean, it's interesting, right? I feel like it's kind of this gray area where you're right. Like the thing that he's missing is this connection to this higher power. Although, I mean, is he magical? And how do we even know, like, what divinity exists? Do the divinities they believe in exist? Not, it's tough to tell, right? So yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, maybe the divine connection is not a requirement, but he's claiming it. He's claiming it, and I don't think that's true. So,
well, yeah, he definitely is not what he says he is, but is he at the same time, like, I guess part of my conflict too is like, is he their best weapon against the consult? You know what I mean? Like, I don't totally blame Akamian for thinking that, given that there is this prophecy, and why not believe that this prophecy is real, right? When you have these memories of this past life, like, certainly the memories may be flawed, but the apocalypse is real. That these kings were real. That he is probably descended from these kings, and you also know that he's capable of these things that you can't explain, and is your best weapon at this point against the consult. It's tough, because Kellis, I mean, part of the question you have to ask too, and I think we've talked about this before, is just like, what's better, Kellis or the consult? Seemingly, you want to say Kellis because the consult are like these alien evil, but like, I mean, I don't know, like, who knows how far he'll go? Who knows what he'll do? He's already done a lot of terrible things. Like, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Kellis is it's like if you have a really mean therapist, that's
not just like a mean therapist, but one who will like actively like get together with your girlfriend or your boyfriend and and like steal all your friends away from you, and like they woo your parents too, and like it's just like the worst therapist you've ever had, but they also like say the wisest things you've ever heard. It's terrible.
Was it to Saban, or there were a couple of conversations in which he told people, "This is what I think you're actually feeling," and I was like, "Yeah, that's what a therapist does, except a lot more gently, telling you where your thoughts are coming from, so you can deal with it." He has no interest in letting people deal with it. It's like, no, you're wrong, I'm right, because this is how you think, and there's some inherent judgment there, I think. But yeah, that was interesting. I especially loved how the Scarlet Spires, the head of the Scarlet Spires, I forget his name.
Eleazaris.
Elizaris.
Elias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
how he talked about, he tells you your secrets that you keep from yourself. And I thought that was
Hmm.
pretty brilliant. And also really, I think, a good explanation of the darkness that comes before, because I think, at least to me, it wasn't like hyper clear what was meant by it. I think it's becoming more clear now, but it could have meant many different things. This is at least one of the things that they mean, right? The secret reasons why we do the things we do. But yeah, overall, I agree. Like, that's a very interesting question. I think, once again, I've harped on about this before, but I think Akamian's making a lot of assumptions when he thinks that Kellis is going to save the world, and all that's going to, like, I don't. How do you know he's not going to bring about the end of the world? How do you know he's not? What does saving entail? What's the world going to look like under his rule? It's not. Yeah. But of course, Akamian doesn't know about the manipulation. He probably is even buying into the prophet thing. I think the last line of the fourth chapter implies that he has
Oh, yeah.
bought into it.
Yeah, totally. I think he's drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, I don't think he would be so malleable, and so accepting of all that Kellis has done, particularly in relation to Esmanat, if it wasn't for the fact that he genuinely believes he's a prophet and their last best hope against the consult.
Yeah, but the prophet bit wasn't a requirement for the saving the world bit. Right? It's just incidental. But he
That's fair.
believes that he has some additional powers that might help save the world, perhaps. And also, I don't think it was mentioned a whole lot in this section, but he has this hope of salvation himself, right? That the prophet is rewriting the tusk now. He's redefining all the rules, and in this new world, perhaps there is a place for sorcerers in the afterlife, heaven, afterlife, whatever.
One thing I wanted to say is, I don't think it's going to work out too well unless, for example, meaning I don't think that Kellis is necessarily going to save everybody unless it's in his interest, right?
Sure.
Like I think everything is kind of leading up to him connecting with his father, but we don't really. His father is probably a pretty bad dude, and one of the things I kept thinking about is the prophecy is about an Anasarimbor. Is it Kellis or is it his father? You know
That's
what I
true.
mean? Like I
Mhm.
was like
That's a good
thinking,
point.
I kept thinking. I actually went back and reread the first what do you call it? The prologue in the first book.
Mhm.
I'm not saying I found anything great, but I mean his father is depicted as this guy basically that was kind of banished from the Dunyain, and because he did. I don't have the exact words, but I found that really interesting. Like, and like basically, if I understood it correctly, like the Dunin are finished. Like that was the end of them because of what he did. Although it's not very clear, so I just keep thinking about what's leading up to this father. And Kellis is supposedly going to correct some sort of wrong, or I don't know, but his father called to him in a dream, which I found very interesting.
My understanding was that what he did wrong was he left. Was that not it? Was he banished? I thought he like fled. I mean, not like fled, but like he left the whatever that city's called. I'm blanking on the name.
Kunayuri or something. But I think it's a little bit unclear. It's a little unclear.
No, it's definitely vague.
Yeah,
they're vague around all of that.
I got the sense that he was like the end of them, like and so like they waited, I think, for Kellis to be old enough, I believe, because they're the line of the kings, like you said, Carl. I don't know that Dunyain themselves. I don't know who they are. I wonder if they're like
right.
Somehow connected to Saswata or whatever. But anyway, I couldn't help but I was really because we had extra time, I was just really like, I don't know, thinking, and I didn't look up anything online, but I kept like, maybe I'll find something. I did enjoy rereading the prologue.
On kind of the note of the mystery of the Dunyain, which we've talked about off and on, I can't be the only one who thinks like they must have some horrible messed up origin story. Like everything we're finding out so far is like everything that you think like there's some mystery, like where did they come from? It ends up being like the worst thing you can imagine, you know? And the Dunyain, considering that like no one remembers them. Seswatha, like you said, maybe they're tied to Seswatha, but says like Akamia doesn't know anything about them. He now knows the word Dunyain, and he doesn't like think of, you know, he doesn't have a memory of them seemingly. I would have to reread to check, but I don't know for certain if he mentioned to Notzera, the big consult, or not consult, the big mandate guy. Thank you. That Kellis is Dunyain. Maybe not. Maybe they have some sort of history log of that, but like,
does Akamian know Kellis is Dunyain? Has that happened yet?
No, I don't think so.
Is he not? Okay, like, maybe I'm making that up.
Is he familiar with that word?
I would have to check to see. I know the consult knows, so I don't know why. I mean, maybe he doesn't. In that case, maybe that'll be the big reveal. Is Akamian will hear that and suddenly be like, "Oh no, not these guys!" You know. I'm not sure.
Carl, I agree with you that I think they're like seriously bad news. Like their origin story is probably.
Do you think?
What's so weird is they were refugees, you know, like that's how we're introduced to them, is they were fleeing the apocalypse, but we don't know why. Like,
before, I feel like they've existed long before.
Oh, I agree. Like I definitely think.
Anyway, when I reread that, I was like, "Whoa, that was kind of interesting." I didn't like, nothing was really clear, but
what's so weird about it to me is like, I don't know, maybe it's just because like we're obviously dealing with sort of like twisted and like epic fantasyized like versions of kind of the Abrahamic faiths and you know, the Crusades and everything, and we don't really have like a Jewish equivalent, right, of like this third religion that's like the oldest, that sort of in some ways was the foundation for the others, right? Although we hear about these latter, you know, in Rithi Sejanus is the latter prophet, right? And then you have the other prophet, Fane. And, you know, when I hear the refugees, I think of like, one of my first thoughts was like the Jewish people who were like, you know, you think historically have been like exiled constantly, whether you go from like Egypt or just like all over, like, you know, Guy Gabriel Kay, I know his version of Judaism, the people are called like the wandering people, because they're constantly having to move. They're constantly kicked out of their cities. You know, Europe has a whole history, you know, of like in France or in England or wherever, like kicking out all the Jews. And so that was my first thought of the Dunyain, and they don't seemingly believe in the God. So like, it's not actually tied to them, but then you have this, like, I guess what I'm getting at is like, I initially was like, oh, you know, I'm kind of like sympathetic to them. They almost seem like victims is what I'm getting at, like victims of some sort of great atrocity. But then the more we find out about them, the more we're like, oh, these guys suck. Like they're horrible. They're evil. So I'm like, I'm wondering, I'm so curious what their deal is, you know, like I get such weird vibe. Like they're just surrounded by so much mystery, you know. I don't know. I don't know what to think with them.
Yeah. Do you think we just saw two? Well, okay, we don't know what's up with Moengus yet, but we saw at least how he manipulated Nair, right? So do you think we just saw two very bad examples of the Dunyan, or do you think they're all like that? I mean, sure, like how they manipulated everyone is a consequence of their training, but the training doesn't define how you behave, right? It's just...
But the training includes cutting people open and showing the muscles of their face.
That's true. Yes.
And you know, kicking out the people who were like, I forget what they call them, but like the lesser people, you know, the one, they had some term for like people who could not cut themselves off, or like
that's whose faces they cut, right?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
it's just like undesirables, you know. They're it's just I remember distinctly being, maybe they're not all bad, maybe it's just Kellis, and then we got that flashback and it was like, oh no, they're horrible. Like these are like mad scientists, eugenicists. Like I don't think the Nazi, parallels are like unintended. Like I think it's very intentional that Kellis is like this blonde-haired, blue-eyed Ubermensch.
Carefully bred.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think the eugenics thing is like totally intentional. Now the interesting thing is the Dunyain, I don't know, aren't necessarily described that way. I think it's the Anasurimbor line that has those features. It's the Norserai, the northern people who are blonde-haired, blue-eyed. We don't know where the Dunyain are from, presumably from the north, but I don't know that for a fact. I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. There's a lot going on there.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Seshwata doesn't remember, so these guys don't know. It's almost like the Dunyan have been forgotten about. If they were ever widely known about, they have been forgotten, much like the consult has been forgotten in the current time. So that makes sense.
What's so mysterious about it to me is like, why wouldn't Seshwata know about them or think of them, right? They don't come up in the memory. So whether Kamian knows about like that Kellis Dunyan or not, Seshwata doesn't think about them. They're seemingly not a big deal in the first apocalypse. So what were they, just this like small minority of people, or were they like that's what I'm saying is like there's so much that like the pieces, the puzzle that's like fitting together, like it just doesn't quite make sense. And I'm like, and not in a like Bakker is doing something wrong way, like this is a problem way, but like in a I can't like even like fathom like what is their deal, what's their history, where do they fit into the big picture here? Because we can kind of piece together a lot of the factions and where they come from and how it all works. And the Dunyain are this big question mark of like, how do they fit into the apocalypse? Like how do they make sense in this world? It's really intriguing. It's certainly the part of the world building I'm most fascinated by at this point.
Everybody wants to know, even the consult wants to know.
Right, exactly.
Steve, I saw you unmuted yourself a few times while we were talking, but did you have anything to add to our discussion?
No, I'm just I'm enjoying the discussion of the Anasurimbor and Dunyain. But I was actually going to bring up something about Esminet, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to talk about it now, I guess?
Yes. Oh, so going back to Esminet, there's a passage that I tagged on page 35. This, she understood, was power, the translation of word into fact. She only needs speak and the world would be rewritten. Before her voice could conjure only custom, ragged breaths and quicken seed. Before her cries would only forestall affliction and whittle what small mercies might come. But now her voice had become that mercy, that affliction. So you can see her she's starting to change, and she's starting to feel like she has her words are powerful. So I just love that. I love the transformation that she's going through right now.
Yeah. That is a really great, powerful, no pun intended quote there, right? The translation of word into fact, like defining power that way. It is profound in a sense, just in the way that like, yeah, once you have power, you can rewrite reality in a sense, history is written by the victors, right? Whatever you say is real, right? The way dictators are like, they'll just deny, things that happened, it's.
And there was a line that she told Kamian that it just happened. It's like, wow. On page 41, she tells him, "You were my life." When she raised her face, it was only with weariness, not ferocity she had expected. And he is my world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and I think, the line just before that. So it's not just her being callous to him with words by trying to protect herself, right? It's what she's thinking to herself too that sort of angered me a little bit. She's thinking, what does he matter? His heart was broken long before. And you were what he used to heal himself a little bit. So no compassion for that. But anyway. So
I want to say too that one of the quotes I really liked that I think kind of ties into this is the epigraph at the start of chapter 3. If soot stains your tunic, dye it black. This is vengeance. And it's just such a, assuming y'all are interpreting that the same way I am, like a really bleak way of looking at the world and looking at trauma and things, and it's effectively what a lot of these characters, and certainly Esmenet right now, is doing, right? Where it's like, okay, if people hurt you, you become the thing that hurt you. You take it into yourself and make it part of you. And it's like Esmenet is becoming like the men who have abused her. It's really sad and tragic. Tragic is, I think, the right word for it. It's very Greek tragedy.
It's one of my favorite quotes from the whole series. I love that one.
It's real good.
yeah, I did wonder about how to interpret this. It almost felt like it was a warning that you're hurting yourself more than you're doing anything like externally if you are seeking vengeance. But I like your interpretation a lot more. That makes more sense.
Well, I mean, I think you're right too, where you are in a sense hurting yourself, or like, like spiritually, like, that like you're just like your core identity, you're taking this damage that was done to you and making that part of who you are, and possibly even then, inflicting that back on the world. It's a way of like trying to take power, but you're also just internalizing the damage. It's internal. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's meant to be particularly. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. You're using soot, right? Black, right? Darkness. This imagery of darkness, right? Like this is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it's a powerful but sad thought, but certainly it could be a cautionary tale, right? I mean, I guess we don't know enough about the person who's quoted there that, it could be almost satirical, but it certainly seems to be kind of the way Esmenet, for example, is approaching life at the moment.
Almost like you're embracing it, like you're taking it in and becoming what that thing is. Like you're becoming that thing.
Yeah.
I like that there's no context. It's just the beginning of the chapter. So it allows you to kind of dwell on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It is, and Esmenet isn't really lashing out right now. She's oddly at peace with what she's doing, and I guess her lot in life now, it's maybe that's coming from just being in a happy place, but what she's giving back to the world as a result.
She's becoming more like Kellis in a sense, right? Where she just doesn't feel bad about the action she takes. She's very clinical about it all, and callous. Keep coming back to that word. She's very callous right now.
It's also, I don't know if this is intentional or if this is how I read it and it's all wrong, but that bit, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, when some other Inriti are joining this holy war because they've come by the ocean, and they're meeting the people who have been through the foot soldiers who have been through the holy war already. And I'm trying to find the quote, but they talk about how they all look at them like they're objects. They've bled whatever part of them was related to these Inriti, and now they've become other people. And yes, that I think is talking about their experience, because they've been through such a terrible experience so far, and it's a lot. But also, I think it's speaking to their transformation with the doctrine that Kellis is giving them, right? It how, like, I think one of the lines, I don't know if I mentioned it already, is like they looked at them as if they were objects, as if everything is an object, and that's how you look at them. So it seems, I don't know if this interpretation is correct, but it seems like they've gained this new objectivity in the world, and they don't feel anymore like Kellis is a twisted version of what I think is a very interesting philosophy, and these guys seem to be twisted versions of Kellis. But yeah, I don't know. Did you guys interpret it that way, or how did that seem like? Just extending your point about what you said about Esmenet becoming callous, it feels like the whole holy war is in some way, it's like taking a concept that you don't fully understand and trying to apply it. It that seems to be at least part of it, if not all of it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Varsha. I think that interpretation's even better than my interpretation, which really was just that they were, they had been through the war, and I thought he was depicting them as just people that they've really been through a lot. I mean, thousands and thousands people of their own people died, and they've been through plague and famine and everything, and so I think that does take a lot out of you. So I was trying to sympathize with them, but your point is a good one, and made me even think about that thousandfold thought, which we still don't know what it is. I wondered if he's able to have some effect on the populace, the followers, so that they're kind of thinking more like him. Or I still not totally sure what it means, but I think yeah.
Yeah, I found the lines. If I could just read it real quick. Out of calamity, they had salvaged only the barest necessities. All else had been jettisoned. Their spare manner, their guarded speech, their disinterested contempt for excess, all spoke to a dangerous thrift. And nowhere was this more evident than in their eyes. They stared with the blank weariness of men who never slept, not peering, not watching, but observing, and with a directness that transcended bold or rude. I think it was the observing bit that got me. It's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole army is very callous. I mean, I don't know that they were ever. Certainly, we talked about the Holy War being a character, and I don't think it's ever been what you would describe as a particularly noble character. But it has gotten to the point where it's like callous, like sociopathic, and he, it's interesting talking about him twisting people to be more like him, but they really aren't. Like, they're still connected to the darkness that comes before, right? Like, they're this bastardization of what he is.
Yeah.
They're not even at that level. As profoundly messed up as he is, like, he at least has some semblance of control, really. And that for them, it's like this illusion and just like hollowing out, of themselves and of the human parts of themselves, but without actually achieving any sort of enlightenment or power, like true power, I guess you could say. It's tough. So unless someone has something more to say, there was something I was thinking of earlier, but didn't get to interject about it because it's going to veer us wildly off. So I was watching a video, I think, Varsha, you were the one who posted it, of some booktubers talking about the warrior prophet. And someone mentioned that there were demons, which proves hell is real. Some form of hell is real.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally brushed over the fact when, the demons were summoned, that meant that apparently hell is real. Now, I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are about this. One of my first instincts was, well, maybe they're aliens, because we now know aliens are real. And the things that we previously thought were in a lot of fantasy would be associated with kind of demonic forces, the Shrunk and things like that are, I guess the Shrunk were created or something like that. I'm a little unclear exactly how their relationship to the consult works, but the Inkaroi we know are literally extraterrestrials. So what are your thoughts on the demons and the hells, and are mages actually damned? Does their belief in that, actually translate to they're literally damning themselves by doing this thing?
I don't remember when the demons are summoned. Can you remind me?
It was the Scarlet Spires, I believe, summoned some demons against Acamian, I want to say.
It's when Acamian breaks free of when he's being held. Mm-hmm. I believe it was a demon that gets summed up.
And he roasts them. immediately. That's when he's just going ham. Yeah.
Is
It was
he?
awesome.
Was this different from when they summoned that illusory dragon thing to kill the head of the Scarlet Spires?
They do
No,
that a lot.
sorry.
That's one of their favorite tricks,
Their
is the
go-to,
like
yeah.
glowing
Okay.
like dragon head of light.
So is
Which,
that a
as far as I
demon,
understand,
or that's just how the spell looks?
I think it's just how they spell it. My understanding is they sort of almost act through creatures or like mediums, you know, like some sort of other like creatures, you know, like they're like channeling other creatures' energies, I guess, versus like a Kamian who, you know, like just can rewrite reality. You know, it's the metaphysics are a little bit unclear, but my understanding is the dragon head is just like them utilizing like draconic energy, dragon fire, and the demons are like actual demons that they summoned.
I see. Okay, so they exist. They are physical form of something.
I mean, Steve could speak to this more with whatever is not spoilery and however you understand it, because I imagine it remains mysterious to some degree. But you know, I'm curious everyone's thoughts.
Go ahead, Mike, before I go.
Oh, I was curious what you were going to say.
Oh, okay.
I can comment, but if you please go ahead.
I do think it's interesting that we go to certain like heaven and hell. I think we draw those conclusions, but in this like a fantasy setting, we automatically go to that kind of that conclusion. But I do think it's let's be careful, don't spoil anything. I think through the series, through most of the series, I think the question of what does being damned really mean. So if they're damned, what does being damned mean exactly? And I think it's open to interpretation, at least for a while. So you can, I think it's an interesting question of, in this world where we know the Inkurai are a thing, and we've gotten a taste of kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes and the other things that are happening. But I do wonder, because they talk a lot about magic users being damned, but they don't really specify what does damned mean. Like, so I think it's an interesting conversation to have. But I'm not sure that seeing a demon being summoned means that there's heaven and hell. I at least not yet. But I don't know that you can really draw that conclusion over. Like, they conjure a lot of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
there's many different monsters and stuff, right, in this world. In the first chapter we got exposed to the Bashrag, which is this thing that has like a head made of 3 heads. And I mean, I really love trying to picture that one. But I think that we have to be careful using our own interpretation, using our worldview, or our own personal worldview. But because I feel that in this world and also in our own world, there are so many religions, right? So to one religion, the outsider is a heathen. Like I lived in a place where I was the majority was Muslim, and I was viewed as a heathen, actually.
Right.
And that was, it was fine, but just because I was outside of that belief system. And so like I feel like the Nansur in particular, and then Enrithi, I should say it's the Enrithi that view anybody because of what was written in the Tusk to say, if you do sorcery or magic, you're not part of us. You're a sinner. They don't use that word, but that's from some of my Catholic upbringing. I can't help. So I think my interpretation is that anything exists in this world. I'm not so sure if there's heaven or hell, and the question is who's heaven and who's hell, because we also learned, this was so fascinating, that there are that non-men live like for hundreds of lifetimes. So what is that, like? They don't die. I mean, there's so much going on here. Like I, that yeah, a demon could just be some other random thing. But yeah, Barsha, you were going to say something.
Oh, I think you said everything that I wanted
Oh,
to say.
really?
That's essentially what I was going to say too. That I don't think demons, at least my religion, for instance, demons aren't a thing that only exist in hell. They in fact, I don't know if they're a thing in hell. They just exist in the world, right? So it depends on whether demons are a product of hell in this world, and also the question of what does being damned mean. I think, yeah, I agree with you, Mike, that it's not um yeah, like we know in this world there are at least two religions, right? The one that the Sylvandi follow, and these guys, and I suppose the non-men worship the same god that the Sylvandi do. And so
I don't think that's true.
no,
No, the non-men, I don't think
sorry,
this Vivendi worship the no god.
right, the no god, the
I don't
non-men
think
don't
the
worship
non-men
no.
do.
who
No,
who worships the, is it the consult? Yeah, the consult.
consult. Yeah,
And they're the priesthood of the no god, right? But
yeah.
yeah, okay, I have them all mixed up in my head. But
That's
you know,
fair.
we know there are multiple religions,
Mhm.
so the question of damnation is sort of religion specific, unless there's something that applies to the world as a whole, and no matter what religion you follow, which also begs the question, what religion do these sorcerers follow? They are damned apparently by the men of the task, but do they have their own religion? Do they have gods they worship, or do they believe in the existence of said gods? Like the um the mandate schoolmen believe in the existence of the no god, but they don't worship them, right?
Mhm.
So there's some very interesting questions there, like what gods do they believe in, and more than, I guess, what form does atheism take in this world is also an interesting question. So yeah, there's a lot there that I guess we could think about, but don't really have answers to. But yeah, I don't agree that that's the only conclusion of the summoning of demons, that there is a hell.
So I love everything you guys just said, and I agree with all of it on kind of a fundamental level. That because I also was like I wasn't necessarily sure that made it, concrete. And I think the question of like what is damnation that Steve was posing is really interesting, right? Because yeah, I mean, even within religions, right, you have theologians, priests who debate that, right? Like I
Mm.
forget who has the famous quote, but like some Christian theologian was like, hell is the absence of God. And it's not like he's not alone. With his version of damnation or hell is not the only one, right? Like
Mm.
you have the popular consciousness of like, oh, it's fire and brimstone and torturing and shit like that, and you have, I'm sure, versions that are just like, oh, it's just like a void. I mean, as someone who personally doesn't believe in the afterlife in sort of a spiritual sense, there's that additional layer of like, well, like you were saying, Barsha, like what is an atheist? Like someone like Akamian, I guess, is like, I'm very curious because he grew up in this culture, but he doesn't seemingly believe in the tusk, as at least as it's preached, but he still has this sense that he is damned. He carries this guilt. And then the same thing with Scarlet Spires, like how do they view themselves, in relation to the world, right? In relation to the cosmos. It's really interesting. And again, Mike, you made great points about, how do you even define demons, right? Like where, regardless of where these things even come from, I believe it's, Pressure, are you Hindu?
I grew up Hindu.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an atheist now, but yeah.
So my understanding, I could be misquoting, but Zoroastrianism and Hinduism have like reversed like god sort of demon dynamics where like one's gods is the other's demons and vice versa. Do I have that correct by your understanding?
I am not familiar enough with Zoroastrianism to say that, but like I don't know that maybe, but I would have to think like Krishna, Ganesh, and all of those gods are as demons. I've never heard that interpretation.
I
I,
get
I
where I
don't.
read it. I was doing some. I that could be completely made up. I could be getting the religions wrong. It could be different faiths, but the again, just getting at the point, the idea that like how you define demon changes between faiths. How you define heathen, right? It's fundamentally about your worldview, right? Everyone else is a heathen, and our people are not, and it's it's a big question, I think, to reconcile here of like, how do we even define the demons? I know Steven Erikson, the Malazan series, no spoilers, but they're demons and they're never given like a specific, like where they came from thing. And he basically, when asked, was like, demons are just a broad name for like creatures that come from elsewhere. Right.
Mhm.
Almost sort of this like stereotype or like, I don't want to say like slur or something, but like this, it's just this like very broad generic term for aliens in a sense, like just beings that exist in other planes that end up in ours. And I mean, again, and the fact that we have aliens, it just like it adds a whole nother layer to like, how do you even begin to like define the cosmology and the different realms and like how it all works and like what is a demon in this place, right? Like they just kind of broadly throw that out there and and what is damnation? Like Steve was saying, it's a really interesting question.
Yeah, and I think, as far as I know, I could be wrong about this. I don't think Hinduism has words for people who aren't Hindu, like the way Christianity does, and I suppose Islam does. So in some religions, it's not even a thing. Like, what happens if you're not of the religion? I don't even think they have judgment against atheists. Like, this is what will happen to you. It's all karma and like rebirth, the cycle of rebirth, and so on. So it's and again, like I stopped being a practicing Hindu like when I was very little, so I know very little about this. Um but yeah, like that is a great point. Like, what about religions who don't even have concepts of like what happens to those who don't follow said religion, right? It
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea, like the whole word demon, I mean, I don't know the etymology. I imagine it goes back to like Greek, probably is my guess. But this is an imperfect word. I mean, you see this with languages all the time, regardless of the language, of like trying to apply the meaning of one word that has a very specific meaning in a very specific context to then a different culture and a different belief system and a different language. We're like using the word demon to talk about, again, like demons as you define them in like Hinduism or whatever, where it's like it doesn't mean the same thing, right? And in fact, is probably an imperfect translation, regardless. Just like culturally, it's Anyway,
Hinduism has its own words for demons. It's just scary looking things. Things that you put faces that you put outside your house to ward off the evil eye.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
The malevolent entity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, to draw that conclusion is a bit of a leap. Just because it's too
nice.
Yeah, I agree. What
You're
happened?
losing. Oh, we got a different angle, Varsha.
Okay, I think that camera's still on, but apparently got disconnected. It's fine. I'll try and fix it. You guys keep talking.
So, anyone have anything else to say about that, or spinning off from that?
Well, I don't know.
I'm sorry, Mike.
I wasn't going to talk about that actually. I was just going to go back to what I really appreciate. Just I don't want to like start all over again or whatever, but in the first chapter, I was very satisfied that Akamian reconnected with his people. And for whatever reason, I was really desiring that to happen. I don't know why, but then they were like, I thought they were going to be all, like really flipping out. Not Sarah or what have you. He was kind of like, well, okay, that's good to know. You should have told us, but okay, now it wasn't like such a big deal that he kind of hid this really important detail about Kellis. But I was I really enjoyed the dream sequence. Like I
Yeah.
just love. I don't know why, but I just love these dream sequences, and they give us kind of bring us back to what we were discussing, a glimpse into what this world had been, or what is possible. And I love how Bakker kind of opens up the books like that. I think he did the same in Warrior Prophet, and it's not that we come back to the dreams a lot, but I think dreams for the mandate, of course, are, it's just like it's kind of like they're reliving. They're reliving the Saswatha's life or whatever, but apparently you can also see what the other person is dreaming, and then kind of like comment and speak and get like interact. And anyway, I just really wanted to say, like, I love that.
Ditto.
Yeah.
I've loved how Bakker's dealt with the dreams and the flashbacks therein, and like it's just so cool. And adding that additional layer that they can talk to each other in each other's dreams was just like, oh, that's so cool. And I will just throw out there again, I've said this once or twice before, but like I continue to wonder, our memories in real life are very imperfect. The more we learn about them, the more we study them, the more we find out that they are inaccurate, and they continue to change over time. And I wonder, are these memories just magically, perfectly, exactly as they happened? Or can they also change? Can they also be manipulated? Are what we've seen of Saswatha's memories, are they perfect, or are they exactly as things happened objectively? Or are they like history, a narrative of what happened that maybe can change, depending on any number of factors, even just time? But that's all I'll say. Sorry, Varsha, you were going to say something.
I was going to start a slightly new topic. Let's finish talking about this one first.
Oh, no. I was just commenting on chapter 1 that about and we were getting introduced to all these like monsters and beings, and the non-man McCarratrig, and he's got his wall of dead bodies or what have you. Anyway, that was just but I didn't have too much else to add. I just one of those things that I just was like, I'm so glad I'm reading this again.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of dream sequences, the sequence, it wasn't quite a dream sequence, but Nair and the reappearance of Survey. But I think that's a new topic. So, Steve, do you want to go first?
I'll just really quickly comment on the non-men on page 6. To understand the soul of a non-man, the philosopher Kogata, probably mispronouncing, had once written, one only need bear the back of an old and arrogant slave. Scars upon scars. This is what made them mad, all of them. A little bit peek into the non-man, but I did, as we were talking about Saswatha and memories, it did kind of occur to me that there is a little bit of a parallel between Saswatha and the confusion. It seems Kamian mentions that he feels like he's becoming Saswatha, and I wonder if you guys have noticed any parallels between Saswatha and the No God on how they seem a little confused. Both of them do.
Oh,
definitely.
When did that happen? Did Seshwada's confusion happen in the last 12 pages, or was it in the first chapter?
No, not. They don't really mention it. Just in general, like there seems to be a bit of confusion in the conveyance of memories and recalling what had happened.
And McCarran too.
Sorry.
Like there's this sense of almost like, I don't know if the dementia is the right word, but I mean, certainly with the No God, there seems to be a level of like almost senility to him, which again, books later, I'm still like taken back by that. I agree. I think the question of like, again, going back to kind of what I was posing earlier, I don't think I'm pulling this out of my ass. I think we should be wondering, are these, how accurate are these memories? I don't even think they're like, I'm not like proposing that they're completely made up or anything like that, but that the things may be skewed, right? And that, with how long you live. I mean, you put up a great point, Steve, which is like, or a parallel that occurred to me, which maybe you were getting at too, which is like, if you live long enough, like Seswatha's memories, like the non-men, like the no God, what does that do to your memories? You know, like these memories last generations after generations, scars upon scars, right?
Mhm.
What does this do to the mandate, you know, as an organization?
So what I'm interested in is how they inherit Seshwata's memories. Is there like some central source that they each inherit from? And then there is still a possibility of corruption because the sorcerer's personality gets applied on it. So it seems that the events of the world dictate what dreams they see, but it's also down to the interpretation and what they focus on during the dream. Maybe they are Seshwata, so they see what he sees every single time. But um but yeah, is it handed down from schoolman to schoolman? In which case, there is so much more scope for corruption.
Other thing, Tyne, I'm so glad Mike, you brought up this because I'd forgotten all the things that happened in this opening flashback dream thing. They talk about the heron spear again.
Yeah.
Where is the heron spear?
Yep. I was going to mention
I'm
that.
telling you, again, I said this way back in like book 1 when this first came up. There is a parallel. I forget what it's called, but the spear that was used, you know, mythically to like stab Jesus gets quote unquote found in the First Crusade at the Battle of Jerusalem, and when everyone's hopes are like the lowest, you know, the Crusaders are like convinced they're losing. They've been in this horrible long siege. Someone finds the spear and, you know, quote, finds the spear, and suddenly morale gets boosted and they win the battle. They win the siege. They take Jerusalem. I called this shot, you know, way back that someone was going to find this and it was going to be a big deal. I'm calling it again now. I'm re-cementing this, that when they're outside Shime, someone is going to find the heron spear. It may or may not actually be the heron spear, but someone is going to find it, and it's going to be a huge moment for them.
Got to be Kellis. He found the water. Remember, he found the water in the desert.
Right? It's got to be or Nair. Random left field guess, maybe Nair. I don't know why. I'm just like pulling that out of my ass, but I just have this weird feeling that like, what is Nair going to do in the next? I guess he's staying back though.
Nair is going back to Momin, right?
Yeah, ignore me. I totally forgot that he was separating. So never mind. He's doing other stuff.
But he did say he's going to ignore those orders. So.
Oh, really?
Didn't he? He said he's not going to listen to them. Or
okay.
I don't remember.
For some reason, I thought he was. I don't know. I thought he was following through, but maybe not. I don't know. Nair is always like thinking two things at once.
Yeah.
Was it the Spear of Destiny that was it? The spear?
That might be the Nair. That sounds right. It's again. This is like one of the famous moments from the First Crusade. Calling that shot.
The Spear of Destiny again? I don't remember it.
It was one of the spears that one of the soldiers, Roman soldiers, used to stab Jesus when he was crucified.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so, you know, it was supposed to be, you know, it was like drenched in his holy blood, and so it has like magical properties, basically. And I mean, we don't know what the heron spear is exactly, other than it was like, you know, the big weapon that I believe one of the Onisurian boars used, or something like that. But it, you know, similar sort of thing.
I think it was the weapon that defeated the no god.
Oh, you're right. It's what killed the no god. You're right. You're totally right there.
Oh my god, I'm like, I have so many things so muddled in my head. For some reason, I thought the spear belonged to the no god.
I'm going on.
I'm really glad we're doing these discussions to set me straight. I think the no god worships. No, the non-men worship the known god. No, that's wrong.
But you're not totally mixed up, because there are some non-men we found out as of the end of the Warrior Prophet who are with the consult, and we see McCarratrig here is crazy and maybe on their side. I'd have to reread it to see exactly. So I don't think it's wrong that like maybe some of them worship, or at least like are on the no god's side, whatever that is, right? Because like what the consult are doing may not be what the no god wants. The no god is demented. Like, who knows what he wants? You know, like I don't know.
He's like Hulk or something. You know, like he's kind of just like does whatever. And I guess I don't know.
Right.
Doesn't seem to have.
Like,
he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was
That was
gonna
a
say
bad
he didn't
analogy.
like he didn't like being woken up last time. It was-
The old man. That's what he is. I again, I don't think the consult is necessarily acting. I think they're acting independent of, like, they're not being directed by the no god is what I'll say. I think that they are
Mhm.
actively trying to use the no god rather than the reverse.
Mm.
I do
So
think they
the
worship him, but yeah. Anyway,
non-men are the aliens. Are they this?
no,
No.
the Incaroi
They
aliens.
and the Inkaroi are related to the consult. How?
They are at least some
They
of
are
them
a
in
consult,
the consult.
right?
Yeah.
They are the consult. I
I
see.
mean,
Well, they
my
can be.
understanding are the consult are like the top dogs. Like, again, if you know the Wheel of Time, they're like the Forsaken,
Mm.
who, like, lead the movement.
Mhm.
I could totally be wrong about that. And the Incaroi are a specific race or species
Mhm.
of aliens that came down and I think made the Sronk. I may be misremembering or misreading that, but I believe they literally, like, genetically engineered the Sronk using their, like, old science. And that's how
I
we also
see.
have the skin spies and stuff, is they use, like, some
Oh,
sort of
that's right.
magic science, magitech. I don't know. We don't know how it works,
Mm.
but that they use what the old science, the techne,
Mm.
to make a bunch of, like, abominations, essentially, including, I think, the dragons. I think the dragons were
Mm.
also made. It's a lot of that I'm a little bit hazy on, but
And who were the people who discovered the remnants of the Inkaroi's research and therefore awakened the no god? There were some schoolmen,
humans.
right?
Yeah, it was humans. Beyond that, I don't
Human.
remember.
Okay.
It was humans. Because the non-men fought and then, like, sealed them away and put a glamour over everything so no one would find it, and then humans found it anyway and woke them up.
Okay. Okay. So, and the consult directed the humans to do that? No, the
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 men,
consuls
right?
are alive. The humans thought they died. They thought they destroyed them.
um,
They thought they're gone, but they've been living in secret. We don't know where. In probably at least partially Gago Torath, which is the city where the no god got awakened, I believe. Or was that
You
where
think
that happened?
so?
Yes. But that's their big, base. That's their
mm,
headquarters. And yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. A lot of
yeah,
moving pieces.
Lot.
yeah, yeah.
There's a big exposition dump at the end of the second book.
Okay, yeah,
I
I've
did
got to
write down
read that.
some
Yeah.
of it. I won't read it, but it's when Akamian is speaking. Like, for me, it's like 3 or 4 pages worth.
Mm,
Chapter 24.
okay, yeah.
There's a huge
I'll-
glossary, by the way, in this book, but I think it's spoiler filled. Like, I'm
I
not.
think you're right. I noticed that too. I was shocked. This book is not that. This is the shortest book, and it just has an enormous glossary. So I definitely, I'm with you, Mike. I think I would not delve into it. 'Cause I suspect
100
like-
pages long.
yeah,
I want to read it. I like that kind of crap. I don't know why. Like, I love the maps and all the annexes and all that. Like, if a book doesn't have that, I'm like,
I hear you.
I know some people don't.
I'm pretty sure the glossary is spoiler free. So if you need to reference it.
Really?
Yeah, because I avoided it on the first read through. And Katarina and Daniel both said that it's safe. So
Okay.
yeah.
Mm.
So had they read the book before?
Katarina had read it up until the warrior or through the white look warrior. So she knew the last 2 books. And Daniel he's read through it like 5 or 6 times or more.
He knows the
Kind
secrets.
of like Dan. Like Dan and
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Dan of this group.
Okay. Some other interesting stuff. We got to talk about Zarias's mom.
Yes. Yeah, that was going to be the next thing I brought up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the dream sequence I wanted to bring up, not the survey one. Well,
It was real.
so was this a dream or was real, right?
Yeah.
And was it, I think sometime in the Warrior Prophet, I was like, why is she asking so many questions about how he caught Scaos? Is she consult herself? And then, like, I kind of ruled it out in my head because, like, what the hell is the point of planting multiple? Maybe she was planted after Scaos was found. I don't know. But that was terrifying.
I get the sense that in book 1 she was herself, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we'll go back and see that she wasn't. She was acting strange or something. But I think between book 1 and 2 is when the switch happened.
Do you think it was after Scale? Okay, yeah, between books, end of book 1 is when we discovered Scaos. Yeah, and it was sometime in book 2 when was it before or after he went on that procession that she sat there and had all these questions about how he got Scaos. And
I don't know.
that's when I suspected her of being consult, but I can't say I'm happy to have that be true.
Leading up to it, it was going to be very awkward and gross.
Yeah.
So man. I was like, wow, I didn't want to keep reading. And then I was like, oh, okay. Because they were going to sleep together, or he wanted to have sex with her. And then, I guess she was into it, or it's hard to tell. But
that was some of the things though, that like, it was tough to tell at first where like the dividing line was between like him just being a weird pervert and with like weird sexual trauma around his mother, and because I just remember when I was reading that the language started sounding a lot like all the other weird consult-y sex scenes we've seen, where like, or rape scenes you could call them, that like where there's the sex magic, whatever the weird thing that like influences like the hormones and pheromones and whatever's going on there. It's never really fully defined. It started reading to me a little bit like that. And so I wondered, and I will confess, I didn't guess it like way in advance, but once that started, I was like, things are a little weird here. It's a little sus.
Yeah. She, I noticed that too. Like, I don't know about the comparison with the other consult sex scenes. Like, I don't know about the language. I didn't notice that, but as in, not saying it's not that I didn't notice it, but the other bits, it did feel like, she was putting on some, I don't know, putting out some feelers. Like she looks different to him and looks younger to him. There was a lot of suggestion there, and we must remember that they are a race of lovers up here. Jeez.
Well, and to be clear, I when I talked about the language, like I don't even mean specific like words or anything, but just that like, I guess I do mean words. It's not that I notice specific patterns outside of the sexuality becomes out of the character's control almost. It's like they're overwhelmed with lust.
Yeah.
It's this like intense animal urge where every other sex scene we've had, it's not described like that. It's almost kind of clinical, or it's emotional if it's like a Camion and Esmenet. But it's like suddenly when there's like, they have an encounter with one of these consult sex demon things, they suddenly are overwhelmed with lust. Like they like can't help themselves. It just becomes their entire focus. And it seems to be a pattern. I've noticed that like as soon as they start just like acting like that's all they think about, they can't control themselves. There's lots of interesting descriptions of penises that I'm like, okay, this is it. We're dealing with a consult here.
The phallus.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of juxtaposition of, which is very awkward for the reader, of heightened sexuality or heightened feelings, sexual feelings, but also crossed with wanting to kill,
violence,
mass murder, violence, and that's what's kind of very visceral, I think, to the reader.
Great point. No, absolutely. Yeah, there's always that element of violence with the consult.
The glossary at the end for non-men, it says the Chronicle of Tusk, which records the coming of non-men to Ierva, generally refers to non-men as Oseruki, the not us.
The not us.
Sorry for that digression, but yes.
I'm really interested in the non-men. I think that they have what I read also in like the book 1 is they or maybe somewhere else, they kind of switched sides. Like at one point they were like they saw the men as like we were the shepherd of the men. We made the men, but then they turned against us. So they've kind of had this troubled past with. So they've not always been, consult or I'm not even convinced that they're all bad. I mean, I find them to be very enigmatic at this point, and we don't know enough about them. I guess maybe if not this book, maybe it's the next series. I don't know.
I definitely get the vibe that that's where we're headed. It's the next series, non-men stuff.
Mm.
I'm really anxious to see what gets settled at the end of this one. I couldn't help but thinking over the last 2 weeks, like, are we gonna find out like all of these things? There's a lot of loose ends.
Yeah. There was a scene with Maithanet and two boys who one of whom got enslaved, I guess, because they were so eager to see him. And
this I will say was probably the thing that rubbed me the wrong way the most, where I just felt like we got important news there about Maithanet leaving, and there was like good writing, but I was like, did we really need a scene of like a kid getting like kidnapped or raped or like, I mean, I think it's left a little bit like it just was like, did something horrible have to happen there at the end? It just felt excessive to me. And the series sometimes skates that line where like, I'm like, did you have to do that? And a lot of the time, it's always done intentionally, right? And like obviously we're dealing with really dark themes and really dark ideas, and overall I'm okay. Like I can get through it, but like there's that scene in particular is like we're just creating these two new sweet little orphan boys just to have one of them get murdered or raped or both, just to tell us Maithanet is leaving. Like it just felt so, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way reading that, where I was like, why? Like, why are we doing this? It doesn't add anything to the story.
I think I agree with you. I feel like that maybe wasn't super necessary, but also I guess one additional point it seems to be making is how desperately these boys wanted to see Maithanet, just catch a glimpse of him, that they were willing to risk getting pulled into slavery or whatever horrible thing might await them there. At least one of them seemed to be eager enough to do that, and yeah, bad things happen. Like the thing they feared happened to them as a result, and maybe there's some additional commentary there about like faith doesn't save you from bad things. I don't know, but I feel like that's being made elsewhere. So this is
that's my point. Is like all the things you could take from that scene thematically, emotionally, anything we're getting elsewhere. Like we're seeing the way that like faith drives people into dangerous situations, and like we've seen children get killed. We saw a baby get blown up last book. Like I just it just felt like unnecessary. Just unnecessary. Yeah. Like that's just it. Just like like even if it was, I guess even if it wasn't so horrible, it's so horrible, I guess, that makes me have a more visceral reaction to it. But like, I just don't know what it added. Like it didn't feel like it necessarily added anything. Like it didn't develop the themes much. Like we already know this is a terrible world to be a child. We already know it's like dangerous. We already know people are obsessed with Maithanet. I was hoping almost for like some added thing with the consult, as fucked up as it probably would have gotten, just to like get some new lore or something. But it was just like, okay, we're going to look through these orphans' eyes and see that Maithanet is leaving. Like that seemed to be the big development, was Maithanet is leaving. And there were other ways we could have found that out. Like we could have found that out from the POV of one of our characters, like just getting news that Maithanet had left or something, I don't know. It could have been a surprise. Like Maithanet could have just shown up. Like
if that's their only POV and we don't hear about them again, I totally agree with you. I wonder because one of them said the father was killed, so I thought, oh, maybe that's one of the characters that's going to be revealed later or something. I don't know, but we'll see.
I will totally take back everything if it ends up coming back later. I just had the instinct, because we occasionally do get this in other books where you just like briefly have a throwaway POV, and if this isn't throwaway and there's more, then okay, I take it back. You know, I might still feel a little icky about it, but I would take it back. I just had the feeling that the only thing we were getting there was that Maythanet is leaving, but we'll see. I may totally be wrong about that.
No, I agree with you. If it comes back, that's great. If not, I fail to see the necessity of it. I think, yeah, I also not to beat a dead horse, but Survey's character, I failed to see the necessity of how her character was treated. But I think as complaints go, they're very small for me overall. Like, I'm still really enjoying the series quite a bit.
No, definitely not. It's not like, you know, certainly far from a deal breaker. It's just something that, you know, I think it's worth bringing up sometimes, you know, when something bothers you for whatever reason, particularly the series this good, where like there's so much that's, and we've been raving, right? Talking about the mysteries and the world building and the characters. And there's so much that's wonderful that, like, you know, sometimes you have to talk about what maybe doesn't sit with you as well.
One of the things I wanted to mention, and this is really because I'm not totally sure what happened, or maybe it'll be revealed later, but Zynemus, well, right before that, I guess, we learned that Akamian, you know, has this fight with Iacus, I think was the guy that tortured Zynemus in book 2. But I guess Akamian gets his eyeballs and gives them to Iacus. Did I understand that, like, he has Zynemus has the guy's eyeballs and he puts them in his head, and then it cuts back to the Scarlet Spire's people, and they're like, yeah, it's like our plan worked or something. So like, did I just totally, so do I understand that, like, now Zynemus is using this other dude's eyes, and is he like gonna spy on them, or like, I was a little bit confused with that one. So maybe to be revealed later, but I was a little bit, I found it interesting. I'm not complaining, but I wondered what your take on that was.
Yeah, I was also very confused. Yeah, I was confused by that scene too. But I didn't think they planned for the eyes to be taken and used. I don't know. Zynemus he stuck the eyes to his face. I don't know what he intends to achieve from that, other than the soot-based revenge, dyeing his cloak black. But the Scarlet Spires, I thought what he said was, if you remember the words, you're still whole. What I understood from that is, if you can still do your sorcery, you're whole. But that feels like
that's how I took it.
Too much of a wholesome thing for him to say.
I think so. They're friends. If you remember, they're like assholes. So they, you know, the way they're friends is not very nice. But like they talk about, you know, he's like Iocus is like Eleazarus's like right hand man, basically. So I saw that more as he's like comforting him. I didn't see it as like the plan succeeded, you know, or anything like this was intended. I think he did warn him, right? He warned him as like, he's coming for you, you know. Akamian is like, he's on a warpath, you know. And I did think it was very dark and very Greek tragedy that he took the Iocus's eyes and gave them to Zen. I totally missed that Zen put him in his head. Somehow when I read it, I missed that. I don't think he can see out of them, because it didn't seem like Akamian did any magic or anything that would make that work. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Zen's just nuts. I mean, because he did say...
He was very drunk. I know that. I mean,
he's very drunk, and he was saying open, and like the fact that Akamian fled, like that's the word choice you use. Akamian slipped through the door and fled makes me think the eyes aren't actually like working. Zen is just crazy. Like he's drunk and he's still grief stricken over losing his sight and was doing some crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yep. I
God,
agree. But I feel like that's going to turn into him seeing somehow. I don't know. Like that might just work. Not in the way he intends, but some magic way that will maybe foil their plans in the last minute. Like, so here's the thing. You have these what Deus ex machina, the things that are, come out of nowhere to help you. I feel like these things are probably the opposite, that these things will come to in this series somehow. I feel like if something is set up in other series, I'd feel like, oh, that's going to save them later. Here it's like, oh, that's going to ruin them later on. So,
Diabolos ex machina, I believe, is the term you're talking about. But to be fair, if it's set up, it's not coming out of nowhere.
That's
the devil is Diabolos.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I mean, that would be interesting. I don't know what that would like. I feel you though, that like it's like you feel like at any time like, oh god, this is gonna come back and like bite them in the butt. Like I don't know how, but it's going to. So yeah. I kind of feel like Zen is just going to be this like sad figure, kind of like pathetic, like he is.
He's a pariah,
yeah, exactly. That he's someone who just got damaged, trying to do the right thing. Honestly, he was a likable person who just tried to save his friends, and that was a mistake.
So that's okay. That cycle or chain of trauma is also interesting because Akami in some ways is behaving with Zin like Esmenet is behaving with him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, not exactly, because Akamian hasn't found fulfillment elsewhere, but they had a friendship, and he's totally not respecting that now. Probably in the protecting himself department from guilt, from having to deal with the consequences, whatever it is. But once again, not very compassionate or empathetic moves on either character.
I agree that Akamian could be doing more. Like, for example, in that scene, he probably should have not run away. He should have like hugged Zen or like, just like tried to be there for him. But I do think it's slightly different in that Akamian is trying to do something in his own mess that like he took the guy's eyeballs, like that was like, okay, first of all, take a second to just imagine, you've been blinded. You're a drunkard now. You're just miserable all the time. And then suddenly the one guy who comes and talks to you, maybe Proyas does too, I forget, but he walks in and he just hands you two things, and it's these like sticky, wet orbs. And you're like, oh, you have no idea that's coming. Maybe he's told you he's going to take the guy's eyeballs, but you're just there. You're just drinking, getting shit faced, and you just suddenly have eyeballs in your hands. Crazy. Akamian, crazy move, Akamian. But anyway, my point again being that like he's trying to do something in his just like really messed up way, where I almost feel like Esmenet just kind of wants Akamian gone, other than like first practice, and not like out of like a hateful way, but out of like a, I don't want to be vulnerable and you make me vulnerable way. But yeah, I mean, Akamian's not being a good friend. I would agree, but I do feel like he's trying. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, he brought Zen, he brought him back with him. He helped him along. He's like made sure he's been cared for. So
that counts.
Yeah, he certainly isn't being very emotionally supportive. But I mean, how many of these men have we seen actually have like an emotional, or women for that matter, have an emotional like heart to heart? These characters don't know how to talk about their feelings. None of them are. They're all. It's just like it's not in their language. They don't know how to function in that way. Yeah, except for Kellis. Freaking Kellis knows how to do it with everyone else's feelings. Again,
he has none of his own.
Yeah, he's the worst therapist.
I think Nair does have outbursts about his feelings, although he doesn't understand what he's going through. But he definitely expresses himself. He gets duped in this one by the consult, right? and then he gets a visit by I'm just not sure what that character is called. The crow with the human head.
The Synthes.
Synthes.
I believe they're like species.
Yeah,
we got his
like
name at some point, but I don't remember what it was.
Crap.
Yeah.
But Synthes.
Many names.
Trying to pull Nair to his cause. Does he almost accept? I don't remember what happens there, but does he accept?
I do, just for the drama, I do like the idea of Nair joining the consult, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Although I don't feel like he would ever be able to keep that a secret from Kellis. Like, I feel like Kellis would look at him and be like, okay, you betrayed me, time to die. Like, we'll see. I'm sure we're going to see the fallout in this. This is set up at the start, right? So we're going to see that arc play out.
I mean, he is the only one that can that knows how to avoid Kellis. He can, maybe he has the right, maybe he's going to be turned. And we know that the Skilvendi's god is the no god, right? Or they have something along those lines. That's interesting. I didn't think of that.
So I've been rereading Dune, and I see so many more similarities than we noticed before. Eokus and Elisarius, that the Harkonnen and his Mentat, who is addicted to spice. Eokus is addicted to, the name of the substance was Shan. How do you say that? Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Dune Messiah, but I don't want to give it away.
I have to.
Carl knows what I'm talking about.
I know.
Some stuff that happens that related to what we were discussing earlier, but I don't want to say.
Yeah, this is not a spoiler, but I think they're mentioned in the first book. But there are face dancers who are basically shape-shifting assassins. Bakker has been straight up, like, in an interview, was like, the skin spies are the face dancers. Like, I just took that. I was like, I mean, he did his own thing. Clearly, he has the weird alien
spiders
thing going on. Yeah, but there's a lot there. Definitely, these books that if you know your Dune and your Lord of the Rings, you can definitely see the influences he plucks and twists. And same thing with the First Crusade. You can see, or Hellenic kind of that. There's a lot of interesting things he's pulled from.
Blood Meridian is an influence as well. I read it last year, and it comes up. And even there's some words that he uses, like, so this is not a spoiler, they rode on is in book 2. That's said probably 30 times in Blood Meridian because, they're on horses and all of that. But there's a lot of connections there, and that is one of the quotes at the beginning of this book.
That's
so
right.
He must be influenced by Cormac McCarthy as well.
I just started reading my first Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses. I think I'm enjoying it. At first I was like, whoa, this is his style, which I knew going in was weird, but like I really struggled with it for like the first 30 pages, which is actually not that much. And then I kind of got the rhythm of it. And once you get into it, kind of similar to this book, like very different styles, but once you kind of get a feel for the prose, it flows really well. I'm quite enjoying All the Pretty Horses. I don't like Westerns, but I am enjoying it. So I'm definitely going to move on to Blood Meridian, which I understand is his most challenging, but also his best novel.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Let me know when you read it.
What's that?
Let me know when you start it.
I'll reread it. I'm serious.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly in the next few months, my plan is to get to it.
I don't reread books actually, but that's one that I was like, I am going to reread this more than once. It's very dark, and I guess not for everybody. So, but Steve, you might like it.
Hell yeah! Yeah, let's do it. It'd be a fun thing to read together, so we can all endure the trauma, like we are in this series.
I brought it out because I saw the Blood Meridian quote, and I was like, oh, I probably need to read this sometime. So I have it here ready to go.
There you go.
It's there somewhere.
I'm sure you definitely get, like you've said, Mike, you get more out of it. That's something I really appreciate is these books stand on their own. Like they're their own story very much. They're unique enough, but you can see the influences, and Bakker like doesn't try to hide them. Like he's open about them. And it in a way, there's a didactic element where you can kind of see the other authors he's in dialogue with, the other stories, the way that influences his story and his world, and the philosophies of it. It's a lot of fun to dig into, and definitely adds to the depth of this series.
Yeah, and I think it improves upon some things too from there, or expands on them in sort of new ways. Kind of like with the famous Gom Jabbar scene where we try to determine whether our main character is a human or an animal, and I think that's essentially the darkness that comes before, right? And the translation, I think it's almost better the way Bakker does it. They're different treatments of the same thing, but I almost like it more because I understand more what he's trying to say. I think with Herbert, it was almost up to our interpretation, which is nice. You can define what human versus animal means to you, and that's what this is. Other than like the one that is mentioned in the book, which is the ability to behave differently. Like if your primal instincts tell you to do one thing and you have to choose to do something else. But
I think it's exactly that sort of thing, in that they approach it differently. And I agree that sort of the idea of the darkness that comes before adds an additional philosophical layer to it. Like it's kind of exploring that idea of like, because it goes beyond even just like animal instincts into sort of these like emotional, cyclical, some of it's evolutionary, some of it is just like these psychological elements, that fill the darkness. But the Gom Jabbar scene, I've always definitely read is just, are you able to resist your pain, your fear? I mean, you feel the pain, like you can't literally resist it, but are you able to resist the need to run away from it? Can you face the pain? Can you confront it and let it, like fear, pass over you? Which I thought the recent part 1 of the movie, I think did the scene even better in the book, just because of how visceral it is. And then the intercutting with Lady Jessica doing the litany of fear, I just think perfectly nails what that scene is about, and is, I think, the best scene in that movie. And I love that movie, but I just think the way that scene was done was like just peak cinema. The interplay of like the cutting and the acting and just all of it, I just thought just played out wonderfully. But you're so right. I hadn't even connected those ideas, the darkness that comes before, and kind of those the Gom Jabbar scene. Yeah.
I think it's really cool. And now I have to reread Lord of the Rings and then find the influences everywhere else, because with Dune I'm finding it everywhere. All the fantasy books that I read recently, fantasy, interestingly, not sci-fi. But anyway, Steve, do you have quotes for us? Oh, sorry, Mike. Sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
but
to
Dune totally influenced Star Wars as well.
Yeah,
big time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Quotes from Steve time.
No, I always like to mention the Tunic quote. There was one on 27, the epigraph. I tell you, guilt dwells nowhere but in the eyes of the accuser.
Yeah, I like that. I had a few I underlined too, but I don't notice page numbers. I don't write down page numbers. Oh, this one about Kellis. What would they do now that their hallowed scripture could talk back?
All of the epigraphs are good. At chapter 4, like a stern father war shames men into hating their childhood games, which, I don't even know that is always true. I think like, I definitely know some veterans who have like found escape, in I guess you could say like fantasy and things like that. But I do think that there is some truth to the idea that like, whether it's war or like, I think you could translate it into other sort of traumatic events, that it suddenly makes the idea that like when you play at any of those things, certainly again, war is the obvious one. Like you play at violence, you play at these things, suddenly makes you like, it can make you hate, the childhood fantasy, the idea that like it's not so horrible. I definitely thought that was a quite profound insight.
A comment about Espinette and Kellis. I dimmed her, he realized. I was smoke and he is a mirror.
Yeah.
I thought that observation was apt given how Espinette felt with Akamian versus Kellis, but it also made it slightly more heartbreaking for Akamian because he realizes that he's inadequate,
Yeah.
and she's not helping him feel any better about it.
How do you compete against Kellis, though?
You don't, yeah.
Yeah, you
can't. I mean, this is interesting, slightly, and maybe we discussed it a little bit earlier, but Esmeralda was in a three-way relationship with Kellis, so she could technically be with Akamian and Kellis, but I think she was willing to share Kellis. I don't think she wants to split her affection.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's different, the dynamic there.
I think the door is open with Kellis because if it's to his advantage,
Yeah.
we've already seen what he did with Serway. So
yeah,
he could definitely use Esminette to like romantically, sexually get it at Akamian if he feels he needs to. I agree. I could see that happening.
Yeah, and I feel like with Kellis, it's almost like each person can feel like they have an individual and a private relationship with him. Like he's capable of making them feel like that, like they are the only person he has affection for, or that they're significant enough that it feels enough. But so it's almost like there's enough of him to go around, but not enough of Esminette to split between the two.
Yeah, I agree.
Any more, Steve? I think, I agree with Carl. All the epigraphs are really nice. But
Those are the ones I had. There was a couple other ones, but it was a few other tabs, but it was mostly just story points and events.
Did you already say this one? There was no greater tyranny, the memorialist said, than that exercised by slaves over slaves. Did that one already? No. Yeah. That's on page 48. Yeah. And was it? Yeah. Nair about I think Kellis, his doubt over what Kellis does, says, but how could lies do such a thing? That he's convinced that Kellis is lying to the world. And he's like, how can lies bring about the result that Kellis does? I think that's what that is, if I remember correctly, but I don't have the full context. But anyway, there's a lot of good lines in this one. I have highlights and underline everything.
just every line you read. Oh, that's it. Oh man, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as I made it out, but there's that paragraph, for instance. Steve's gonna be angry at me, but look at
that.
No. Vandalizing your own book.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
How dare you?
Not the sacred texts.
Yeah. It's just easier than keeping a notebook. I have to carry it around with me, and then sometimes I leave it upstairs, and then out of laziness, I'll have to stop logging it. Yeah, it's just easier to write in the book I already have.
I respect people who take notes just in general. I can never do it with books. I play Dungeons and Dragons with friends, and I'm not one of the people who takes notes. I would be in so much trouble if a couple of my friends didn't take notes. One of my laziness is, I guess, one of my vices. I have no desire to do it.
But you remember things much better than people like myself. So if I didn't take some notes, I would have nothing to say.
I sometimes I definitely fall. I trap myself in corners sometimes, but names I'm rough with.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was going to say that must mean that you have great confidence in your memory, which is nice because I need to write things down to remember them. Even if it's just I wrote it down at some point, that helps me remember better. I may never go look up the notes, but writing it down helps.
Mhm.
What I have confidence in is that I will remember something if it matters.
Hmm.
And that's not always true. I have gotten in trouble, but that's my general POV. That's my darkness that comes before. On that note, I will say I've started being able to differentiate the different nations and ethnic groups. I've realized of the not the Kayanin, beyond just like they have a whole bunch of tribes and stuff, but of the Inrithi Crusaders, that I've realized I've started being like, oh, I see that, like the Tidoni, like I know what their deal is, like those are the people who wear like the heads on their belts and things like that. Like I'm like, okay, so I got to give credit to Bakker that, I remember in book 1 being like, I have no idea the differences between these. I hope if it matters, I'll sort of pick up on them, but over time it's just like gradually kind of started absorbing that information. So I got to give a shout out to my man, R. Scott Bakker. I imagine it's even clearer, obviously, on read-throughs when it's like kind of cemented more, but I can kind of follow along better. I've noticed.
Nice. I'm not there yet. I doubt that I will be, but but honestly, like I think for me, what's interesting is that it's not strictly necessary. Like I'm not there yet, but it's not affecting my understanding or enjoyment of the story. Like, sure, I got all my non-men and consult affiliations muddled up, but I think when it becomes important, I will get it. Like there were battles where I thought some group were Kianin, but it turned out they were not. And I was like, yeah, like I got that from the context. Like I don't need to remember this, and it's not super important to the rest of the story. So yeah, I like that. I like that even though there's a lot, the general structure is not hard to follow.
Yeah.
It is interesting that like kind of the main plot arc is rather straightforward, it's just we're going to the city and taking everything on our path, and while this is happening, or at least in the previous 2 books, it's Kellis, I'm going to take over everything as part of this movement. Like I'm going to win over everyone, and you can just see it all as things go along, developing. It's not too, I do think that there's something to be said there, that like there are a lot of complexities, like a lot, but the actual like overarching plot is like straightforward, and definitely helps make it more palatable. I think easier to follow on and like get invested in.
Yep. That makes sense. I'm eager to read on, find out some more. Meanwhile, where can people find all of you while we read up during the next week? I guess we'll start with Carl this time. Go backwards.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on social media at Carl D. Albert, and you can find me at the PageChewing forum, where I would prefer to talk to you. Certainly over Twitter or X. And yeah, I believe that's all I need to say.
Mike?
Yeah, similarly, you can also find me on the PageChewing forum, and I will just mention briefly that you can listen to Steve and myself talk about comics on the PageChewing Comics and Manga, and we have a segment called Weekly Pulls, where we talk about our pick of the week.
Yes, nice play there, Mike.
How did I do, Steve? Did I do okay?
Perfect. Yeah, you have to take over for me.
No way.
Yeah, no, you will. You can also find me on PageChewing, Film Chewing, or PageChewing Comics and Manga, the podcasts. And I did finish Truth of Crowns. No one can see me holding up the book, but we are ready to discuss it soon. And if you enjoy tragedy and grief, then you will like Truth of Crowns.
Yeah, it is a sad book. A lot of people die.
Loved it. So, yeah, anxious. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's it.
Cool. And you can find me on the PageChewing forum. I am also working my way through Carl's book. I have about 100-ish pages left. We'll be there for the discussion soon. Yeah, other than that, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and links to our podcasts, Speculative Speculations, and another sci-fi podcast, all on the channel. And well, the other sci-fi podcast is just our SF Masterworks podcastified, but yeah. And meanwhile, PageChewing forum, come check us out there if you'd like to join us on these discussions. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.